Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and this lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson. We made it all the way up to the 15th verse in the 7th chapter of Ecclesiastes, so we're going to pick up on the 16th verse. And the first thing we notice is that Solomon follows an antithetical formula, which is found throughout the genre of Old Testament wisdom literature, whereby one thing is contrasted with another thing, and the superiority of one way is self-evident, and the with the implicit admonition not to succumb to the inferior way. So the 16th verse reads, "Do not be over-righteous, neither be over-wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be increasingly wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time?" So the contrast is over-righteous. It follows the same verbal formula, minus the antithetical switch of antitheses. So over-righteousness is contrasted with wickedness, and wisdom is contrasted with foolishness. Now, his choice of words is important because over-righteous means don't have an inflated conception of your own righteousness. Strictly speaking, it would be to know vice or negative potential if one could have an abundance of righteousness, but we have no righteousness apart from our connection to the Messiah. And the temptation for intelligent people to overflate the significance of their intelligence to the realm of wisdom is common amongst lower tier intellectuals, but they both result in destruction. And the way of the wickedness and the fool is the way that they live and orient their lives is not going to prevent them from dying. So why die before your time? The way of the fool can shorten the life, and it is upon each of us to live out our natural lives on earth as long as the appointment runs. So and we have to exercise our agency along the way. So every day there are literally thousands of decisions we make, and they are important. They do create a ripple effect that will stay with us as long as we live. "It is good that you should take hold of this, and also not withhold your hand from the other. For he who fears Elohim comes forth with all of them." So this is advice he's trying to pass on to posterity, that there should be no duplicity in the generosity, and so the temptation is common for people to give charitable donations with ulterior motives, namely getting their name on a plaque or the recognition for their philanthropy, but Solomon was seemingly above all that stuff. "Wisdom makes the wise strong, more than 10 rulers that are in the city." Now, Solomon was able to rule without resorting to war. His wisdom was such that he pursued the path of diplomacy and commerce to create a force to be reckoned with in its own day and age. And he's saying that the value of 10 warriors is no substitute for one person, because the leverage which that one person can yield is more total volume than that which 10 strong men can, by analogy and metaphor. "For there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and does not sin." This translates the doctrine of universal depravity, whereby every single person is tainted by sin and therefore constitutionally incapable to enter the sacred space of heaven. Ergo, we rely on the appropriation and the imputation of an alien righteousness that comes apart from ourselves, and without this connection we would have no lifeline into eternity. But that's getting a little far outside of the scope of the verse itself to return to there. This brings to mind other passages, namely Psalm 14, 1-3, 52, 2-3, Romans 3:10, and a passage in the Kings that expound more fully on the doctrine of universal depravity. But the concept simplified is that there is no righteousness that any person can claim that's of any eternal efficaciousness. Also, do not take to heart all the words they speak, lest you hear your servant cursing you. So every day we are bombarded by voices, each with competing claims for our attention, and the voices we listen to are the ones we're going to indulge and feed. So the voices in our head that predominate are the ones that we feed the most, and in the connection between the frequency of words of fools and whereas a prudent man will conceal, they'll accomplish the art of saying much while appearing to saying little, while the foolish man rabbles on ad infinitum ad nauseum, saying nothing of substance, is one of the ideas connected throughout Ecclesiastes. For you know in your heart that many times you have cursed others. So even however outwardly we can suppress the secret, there is no person living who has secretly wished ill on someone who wronged them, or for some other more sadistic reason, but it's something unnatural, and that is rooted in the distortion of sin, which mars our soul from its proper course of direction. All this I have proved by wisdom. I said, I am wise, but it was far from me. Now that is a testament to his wisdom, in that the wiser one gets, the more aware of the nothingness that they know becomes. They eventually hit a wall and run into an abyss which exists between the things they will know and can know versus the things that are known eternally by the omniscient one. So any discipline or academic discipline is to be cultured and cultivated, but only insofar as they respect the fundamentals of our faith. That which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it? So he's aware of the mystic entity of wisdom and the answer and meaning to life. He compares it to chasing the wind in other versions, but the concept is inviolate, that it's a fool's errand and a waste of time and energy that man cannot escape from, seemingly, while on this round ball on which we dwell. I have turned around even my heart to know and to search, and to seek out wisdom and a conclusion, to know the wickedness of folly, even of foolishness and madness. So Solomon was not a lazy scholar. Some people have the impression that once he was given all the wisdom he was given, that was a one-and-done finality. But the truth is that he did progress in wisdom as he advanced in years, as each occasion emerged where he could exercise the divine grace. So there is some independent effort in the knowledge he accumulated, and the tragedy and irony of having accumulated all this knowledge is that by the writing of Ecclesiastes, he's beginning to question the whole practical pursuit of knowledge itself, because the reader has the impression that he's very much aware that he's at death's door, and very overwhelmed by the idea of his mortality coming to an end. So it does all tie together. I know I took us probably far off the map, so when lost, we're going to return to the source. And I found more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are shackles. He who pleases Elohim escapes from her, but the sinner is captured by her. So this is a concept he communicates throughout Proverbs, in that the foolishness of falling into the seductress's sirens, which is compared to the worst conceivable woman imaginable. And he has plenty to say about the opposite sex in all of his works, but we're going to touch on that later because it does come up eventually. See, this I have found, says Quoleth, one by one, to find a conclusion. Quoleth is generally translated as preachers, and this has compelled the scholarly majority to interpret the writing of Ecclesiastes as a sermon, but I think the more appropriate emphasis is that of an internal monologue. He's not necessarily saying this out loud, but it's a conversation in one man's head because there's no character interaction throughout all 12 chapters. So he's just musing to himself and to no one in particular, but maybe to posterity, and he's dedicating it to God, hence it wound up in the canon. Which by my being still seeks, but I have not found. I have found one man among 1,000, but a woman among all these I have not found. So his life is motivated by a quest and a pursuit for wisdom and ultimately satisfaction. Now, he pursued wealth and wisdom to their unnatural extremes almost. And the lesson that he goes, the nearer he flies high to the sun, the more likely the wings of Icarus will be cut off. So he's crushed by an awareness that all his success, he was a success by any measure of worldly standard, could not bring him satisfaction, and he's in search of satisfaction, something that will hopefully last forever, and he does have the sense of his own mortality and the vanishing show that is life, which is but a flicker in eternity. But as to the gender equality, now women were not privileged with religious education in his day, ergo it would have been impossible for one to have the proper training that he did, and he was implicitly the only one. So he was the one of the 1,000, and in some translations, the verse indicates that whose wisdom was pleasing to the Father. So there is an abyss of incomprehensibility which exists between us and him. Although there is nothing that he does not know, we can only scratch the surface, never presume to fathom the depths of his being. So the final verse reads, "Truly this only I have found, that Elohim made man straight, but they have sought out many devices." So even though we were created for a wise and good and healthy purpose, the tragedy of the human race is that we are inheritors of the disease, which our primordial ancestor Adam, he maligned us on a thus far permanent course, whereby in this world we inhabit, disease, decay, and death are realities we all must prepare for. And with that in mind, school is a life, and it has eternal consequences. So how we live this life, we cannot be made straight by our own efforts, but we can be justified, which is the theological term for declared innocent at the judgment, through the Savior. And that's ultimately excessively Christological interpretation. That's one of the annoying habits I noted in my secondary studies, that a lot of biblical commentators interpret the Old Testament to Christological extremes, the inferences of which do not exist in the text yet spring to their mind. And I think that it can be ultimately more speculative than, strictly speaking, an exegesis. But that's something we might pick up on another lesson. That's a whole conversation in itself. I'm glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. Bye-bye.